Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Rural Pathways celebration. We have so much to celebrate this afternoon. It's the end of the semester. Woohoo, yes. For some of you here, you finished your degree. That's a big celebration, or you're almost finished, right? And we're here to celebrate some really important learning experiences. We have had an amazing semester together across a number of different types of learning experiences connected to rural schools in Montana. And we are going to take some time right now to celebrate those. And we're so glad that we've got some special guests here with us. Some of our administrative are here with us as well. And we're just delighted to take a few moments to share with you right from the students' perspectives. My name's Jane Downey, and I'm the director of our Center for Research on Rural Education. And we're here today with thanks, and we're really pleased to be supported by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, who provided the funding to allow us to create these learning experiences and to have this time to celebrate today. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful co-leaders, our faculty, Marcy and Joe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Joe Hicks, and serve as the PI for the Rural Pathways portion of our Aspire grant, and wanted to just kind of show you a little bit of just kind of the lay of the land. We are so very excited and grateful to be able to provide a rural field experience each year of our undergraduate program. And so over the course of this time, we're going to have the opportunity to give you a little bit more explanation of what each of these experiences entail. We'll then be able to hear the voices of some of our undergraduate participants and what the experience, how it influenced, impacted, and ultimately shaped their view of rural education. And so to begin with, I want to begin sharing a little bit about our rural teaching exploration. This is embedded in our EDU 101 Teaching and Learning freshman seminar course. We piloted with a small group of students last fall, and we learned a lot through that process and took that into kind of inform our approach this spring. And over the course of the spring, we had the opportunity to have Dr. Jane Downey come into the course and share at Center of Research on Rural Education to give kind of some background context. We then had Dr. Marcy Ryer join our students and bring in and prepare various STEAM curriculum kits. And then finally, we had our undergraduate students have the opportunity to visit one of 3 1-2-room schoolhouses in Gallatin County, and to be able to not only just experience the school environment, but to also be able to provide instructional support and ultimately teach and facilitate some learning activities in their first or second semester here at MSU, which is truly something remarkable. We worked with these 3 schools, Malmberg and Spring Hill and Cottonwood schools, and combined, we just really learned so very much and just stand back in awe of the tremendous work that the teachers and administrators are doing in these schools. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our exploration 4 representatives that will be able to kind of speak a little bit more about kind of what they reflected on what they thought before, what their experience was like, and then now what their thoughts are on rural education. And so at this time, if we could have Cambria and Jillian, Robert and Jenna Lynn, if you could just line up here, and we'll have each of you come up to share us a little bit more on each of your slides.
Hi everyone, my name is Cambria Sacred. I went to the Malmberg school. There was only 9 kids at the school total. And like 4 of them were gone when I was there. So there was only 5 kids. It was a super awesome experience. We got to teach them about how MSU works with NASA through the kites and what the kites do for us. My initial thoughts about rural teaching was there's just not a lot of kids and not enough funding, and they don't have as many opportunities as kids in bigger schools. But I realize now that they have just as many or maybe even more opportunities because people get to come in like us and teach them. And then they're just smaller because of where they're located, and they don't necessarily have less funding, they just need less funding.
Hello, my name is Jillian Lundgren, and I went to the Spring Hill School. There was a total of 7 students in the kindergarten through 2nd grade range, and we worked on a mapping activity with them. And my initial conceptions of rural teaching was that it was underfunded, isolated, and had way less opportunities than a larger public school might be. But after working with these kids and seeing how grateful and excited they were to be in class and to learn in any way and capacity, I understood that rural teaching is actually underappreciated, and that it's very welcoming and personal for the students and the teachers, and that it's completely filled with opportunity for each student.
Hi, I'm Robert Shane. I also went to Spring Hill on the other side of that with kind of the 4th to 7th graders. We did like a pointillism painting, but we involved cookies with it because, you know, what kids don't love cookies. My initial like conceptions were like, I wasn't really sure what to expect inside kind of like a smaller school that doesn't have like at least 100 in like the graduating class for me. And just the ideas of how do you work with such like a wide range of like grades. And then after leaving, or like my impressions now is just like a lot of questions, like how do they deal with like certain like curriculums? How do they assess these students? How do they keep them feeling like they're like continuing on with their education? It's just, I don't know, I find it very interesting on these kind of like issues at hand or what they're dealing with.
My name's Jenna Lynn Sleed. I went to Cottonwood Elementary, where there are 14 students from 1st grade to 5th grade. And we did a bunny forensics activity. It's very fun. My initial concepts were that rural school is not really an option for me. I'm in music ed. And so to me, it's like, oh, rural schools don't have music. They don't want music. They don't have funding for music. But they were super welcoming and supportive. And after talking to Dr. Downey, like, I know that they want music. There are some schools that want music. And so to me, like, that seems kind of more of an option for me.
So if we could just give a round of applause for our rural teaching exploration group. And obviously 4 tremendous ambassadors for a group of just shy of 30 of our MSU undergrads that had the opportunity to experience one of our local rural schools this semester. So thank you once again. Our next opportunity typically moves into that 2nd year or sophomore year. And this is something that we extend. It's embedded at this point in time with the EDU 370 integrating technology course. We're looking to also consider our lit and literacy course, EDU 331. And typically in one of these courses, it's had a field placement component since, really over a decade. A traditional placement is kind of in a local school, after school area once a week for 10 weeks. However, through the Rural Pathways program, we've been able to embed rural opportunities. And so students can either opt to have kind of a once a week, 1 visit a week for 5 visits, but extended time, or they can go on an extended experience overnight trip, which has 3 to 4 days, and then typically some additional travel involved. And through this experience, our pre-service teachers are able to take in the community sense, not only within the school walls, but surrounding that school. And so this semester, we had the opportunity to visit in 3 communities in West Yellowstone, in Gardner, and in Glasgow. And so we have representatives specifically available today to speak to you a little bit about the experiences in West Yellowstone and the Glasgow trip. And so if we could have our rural teaching discovery speakers, please approach the stage. We'll start off with Karina.
Hello, I am Karina Brockelbank. I am a sophomore and I had the opportunity to go to West Yellowstone. I was in a third grade classroom for 3 days and I was able to teach a lesson and actually really help out a substitute for a whole day, which was really awesome. West Yellowstone isn't just in one school, and it is something that I thought about West Yellowstone was, or that of rural schools, was that they were all the same. But going to West Yellowstone, I realized how much a tourist town affects a school. We had a few kids missing during my time, and it was specifically because their families were traveling because the park was closing and that town depends on the park. Something that was just like the biggest takeaway was the teen center that is available to some of the students. Since Wellstone is really rural, there's not a lot of fun activities to do. So the school has taken an opportunity and made a place where students can go and hang out. And this was just an amazing opportunity for me and my co-teachers to go in and create relationships with these students and really see and learn about what their life's like on a daily basis. And we got to do some really cool science experiments with them, which was just great. And yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heidi Ernst. I'm a sophomore here at MSU, majoring in early childhood education, and I'm from Rowley, Massachusetts. At this point, I have been able to spend significant time in a kindergarten and first grade classroom back home in Massachusetts. And I've also spent some time working as a substitute teacher as well. And I recently had the opportunity to travel to Glasgow for the Rural Tech Club and spend a week up there with 3 other classmates who I became very close with over the course of the week. I spent most of my time in a kindergarten classroom during my time at Earl Elementary School. And when I heard about Glasgow, I thought it would be a great experience for me because I've never had any type of teaching experience in a rural setting. And I also like the idea of being in like a structured classroom rather than an after school setting. So when I got placed in Glasgow, I told my parents about it, and my dad did some research. He looked it up and he was like, "You're literally going to be going to the middle of nowhere," which ironically is what I heard many of the people from Glasgow say, that that's what the town is known as. So I just wanted to start off by saying that my trip to Glasgow was by far the highlight of my semester. Throughout my time in Glasgow, I had the chance to observe some lessons in a first grade classroom, aside from spending most of my time in a kindergarten classroom. And the teachers were also willing and eager to let me observe and help out in their classrooms. On my first day, I was welcomed into the school with open arms, and the principal jokingly asked me if I'd be interested in a subbing position. And he continued to joke with me about it throughout the whole week. And on my last day, the students asked me, "Why can't you do student teaching here?" Or teacher school here. So that was really sweet. In the classroom, some advice I have for future students is to jump right in with students and engage with them right when you meet them. And throughout the week, I had the chance to lead a small group activity. And I observed that students in her classroom learn best through game-based learning and a lot of hands-on activities. I got to spend a lot of time helping students when they had questions, and I got to observe my teacher's teaching style. And the small community felt very close-knit. And my cooperating teacher was just so amazing. I learned so much from her, and she showed me a lot of resources that I will for sure use in the future. And if I were to go back to Glasgow, I definitely would. I recommend that future students participate in this experience, and it's an opportunity that I will remember forever. It was very eye-opening and amazing to be part of such a small community that was so welcoming.
Cool. Hi, I'm Pace Becker. I also went to Glasgow, and I just wanted to touch on a few notes about it. So first, I wanted to bring up like what an opportunity this was. I like grew a lot from it because just having this like early opportunity to engage with a community as a teacher was like invaluable to me. I grew a lot in just being able to experience what teacherhood is like. Next up, the community. So Glasgow is a tiny town, as Heidi alluded to. I'm from Denver. And I remember like driving around in Glasgow the first couple of days and thinking like, how are there enough people to work at all of these buildings? So that's kind of like what my framework, just like completely unaware of such places. And because of how small these places are, they have to be very supportive. So we got a lot of interaction with our superintendent, the district superintendent. We also got like a shout out when we went to a school board meeting. The community really valued us as individuals who are coming to help out and to do work for them. And that made us feel valued as well and gave us a lot of like room to grow and room to like make mistakes or what have you. The support. So obviously like my field supervisor, my CT were like integral in making this happen. And like a lot of the people here are integral in my experience, but I also have to shout out like my peers who came with me, like Heidi. They really made it like feel like a real thing and made the opportunity that much more significant in my brain. And then I already kind of touched on how I personally grew from it, but yeah, thank you so much.
I just want to thank again Karina and Heidi and Pace. And so as you see this progression, we go from a one-time visit with our exploration level to a 3 to 4 day immersion. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Marcy Ryer, to speak to kind of the full week component found in practicum and then ultimately leading to our student teaching pod.
So my name is Dr. Marcy Ryer, and I end up planning the experiences for some of our juniors and seniors. And I have to say, it's one of the most rewarding parts of my job. It's so awesome to get to see students in a different environment and see them challenging themselves and all the growth that they experience. So the first pathway I will talk about is the rural teaching practicum. We ended up changing the format of this over the years. So it used to end up just being a 1 week experience during spring break, where I would just meet the students right before we would really leave on the trip. And now we have an entire class that has a rural teaching focus. And teaching that class is really wonderful because we have a mix of students from practicum 1, practicum 2, and secondary practicum across all different types of disciplines. So it's wonderful to get all those different types of perspectives on teaching and learning. We still take the 1 week immersive trip to one of our locations. And our whole goal is to immerse the students in not only the school, but the community to give them an idea of what it would be like to live in these particular places. So we have a lot of fun. I'm usually pretty tired by the end of the trips because hanging out with like 10 to 20-year-olds, they keep me young, that is for sure. One component that we've developed over the years is the engagement of the business community and local expertise. So when we did this particular trip to Lewistown and area, we visited a ghost town owned by this gentleman down in the corner, Jerry Hanley. So he owned the entire ghost town with his brother in Maiden, Montana. And the students got to end up throwing some rocks into some of his different machines and getting out the ore. And he just had this really in-depth knowledge of this place that we were going. So it was really wonderful to end up seeing his perspective and having him share that with our students. So I will have our rural teaching practicum students come on up. So it'll be Signe West and Jess Milius.
Hi, I'm Signe West.
I'm Jesse Milius. I'm a history teaching major.
I'm elementary education, and we both went on the Glendive trip this spring, where we were there for a week doing rural practicum. A little bit about Glendive. The population is just under 5,000. They have 4 schools, Jefferson, which is K2, that's where I went, Lincoln, the Washington Middle School, and then the high school. The community is really focused. A lot of the students that I had anyways, their parents worked either directly with the railroad or with the oil field. They also had a lot of farming and ranching students. And then there was the college as well, which has ties throughout all of the schools. So like I said, I was at Jefferson Elementary. There are a total of 253 students. I had 14 in my classroom. I was in a kindergarten classroom. The students were amazing and I was just completely blown away. I'm from a small school as well, about the same or a lot smaller, but I had a similar class size. And I felt like the opportunities that the Glendive students had and just how the school worked together was amazing. They did so well. The curriculum for math was play-based and the kids responded very well to it. They just like picked up on everything. I swear they were rock stars in every sense. And then I was introduced to secret stories, which is how they taught their reading skills. And the kids were better spellers than I am, I swear, in kindergarten. And then they also used Haggerty. I was really blown away by the lack of incentives used, but the good behavior displayed in Glendive. I was at a school here in Bozeman whose kids were also great, but they used incentives for everything, even being the line leader and the end of the line leader. And they would be like right on top of it, like, oh, did you give me my points? These kids only get dynamite tickets as their incentives, and the students, they would put their name in a bucket, and then every morning during the morning meeting, they would draw their names out and they would just wave on the Zoom call, and the kids would all cheer for them like they just won the Super Bowl. Like it was the coolest experience ever. And then I also really thought that the resources available to the school, they had an occupational therapist come in and out of the classrooms to do whole group activities. And then if they noticed any students in particular struggling, they would work with that student later on. And then they also had a lot of counselors. I just thought it was a really, really cool opportunity.
So in terms of the high school, well, let me tell you this first. I learned from this experience and that I would never have gotten without having done it. Fundamentally, very different between elementary schools and high schools. Signe had a story the first day about a kid having, we'll call it an accident on the floor. And you were with kindergartners, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I was mostly with seniors. What do you think I spent my first day doing? We were talking about the Kennedy assassination. Different job entirely. In terms of the high school, it's really nice in there. My CT was an old Marine and he was showing me around it, and you know, his walking pace was like a sprint, at least my sprint. And he was, you know, come on, hurry. And then he's like, okay, this is the crown jewel. Here's this auditorium. And we just walk in and there's this beautiful 1,000-seat auditorium there. The library was great. It was a lot of fun. I get to talk to their librarian there. He sort of set up like this film group. So there was a bunch of kids in there that were just working on this film project. He says, we have a lot of fun, but we didn't get a lot done. It was an interesting time. Across the board, it just felt so community-based in a way. I won't say anything bad about my time at Bozeman High or Bozeman school districts, but when I go in there and it's like lucky if the receptionist looks up, you know, you go to your class and you go back. When I was in Glendive, I started telling jokes with the receptionist like the second day because she had to buzz everyone in. So definitely different experience that I was really glad I had.
So talking about our rural placements versus local placements, like he said, it's just a completely different experience. In Glendive, I definitely took on more of a teacher role right away. I started off Monday morning doing like a little icebreaker activity, and then I was helping teach math and reading that same day. Whereas here in Bozeman, I was a couple weeks in the classroom before I actually started working with the students. The staff, like he said, was so welcoming. I ate in the lunchroom with the teachers, and I just felt like there was a big community-wide thing going on, and I just felt like I was part of the community talking with the teachers like every day. It was so fun. More of a focus on student-led learning. I felt like in Glendive, the kids worked very independently compared to the kids that I worked with here in Bozeman. And kind of like he said, the kids here were great, but I was just so shocked at how independent the kindergartners were, and their ability to problem solve was phenomenal.
Which I'd say the same thing with the high school students. I was able to have sometimes 20, 30-minute conversations about them, about their lives, opportunities I don't think I would have gotten if I would have stayed totally local for my practicum, which was great. I mean, across the board, like the principal at the high school, turns out he went to MSU, he was in the history department just like me. He had a lot of stories about my department chair, so that was fun. We had the art teacher at Glendive High just had this whole like incredible apparatus. I mean, it was so colorful in her room, and it just felt like it was spreading out slowly more and more over time. Absolutely, it's just even just having those two different opportunities is, I think, the value of that's completely intangible. You want to talk about some of the adventures? I can go with painting.
Okay.
In terms of so it says painting on here. We went up into this person's studio, which was really cool downtown. I don't paint. I was annoyed to be going up to paint. I've now watched like 30 hours of Bob Ross. I'm gonna take it up. I was so invested by the end of that. It was really quite a lot of fun. Axe throwing was a bit scary. Go ahead.
It was good bonding. I would say the Glendive adventures, that was just a whole another aspect that I wasn't really expecting. I was kind of expecting to go to Glendive, and I saw on the itinerary that we were going to be doing all these different things. But I really felt like we were just going to be at the school and then go home. But I think getting to go and participate in all these opportunities just made the whole experience so much fun. One thing that I didn't put on here, but me and Audrey's goal was to find the local coffee club and have coffee with them in the morning, and we were successful. So we found the guys and we talked about all things Glendive, and it was just like so much fun. We also we went to the state park, our very first day there, and it was just a really fun way to start off our trip. Yeah, I agree. The axe throwing was scary, but we had Lauren was amazing at axe throwing, for no doubt. And yeah, it was just a lot of cool things, and the community was so welcoming everywhere we went. Like, the teachers talked about us. Like, my teacher told me, she's like, "Oh, we saw you guys touring Glendive last night." Like, kind of like, how often do they get tourists in Glendive? But yeah, we had a lot of fun experiences. Yeah. Okay. I think from my experience, I've always, before getting to do rural practicum, I knew that I wanted to teach in a smaller setting. But getting to go to rural practicum, it just gave me such a reassuring feeling. I loved the small town feel that Glendive had to offer, and I just definitely felt like I was part of a team. I think that rural Montana is the heart of Montana, and that we need to invest into our future by investing into our rural schools, whether that's funding or teachers. In any sense, I think they need to get our attention.
Yeah, I mean, I'm moving to a large metro in just a few weeks, and there's a huge part of me that wishes that wasn't the case and I could go back out to a rural setting at this point now that I've had this experience. It's the good and the bad thing of the community is so much more tight. Everyone knows everything. Some of my students that we were just talking about the Kennedy assassination with were my servers at places, things like that. It feels so much more tight, and yeah, it's absolutely something I'd recommend to anyone considering it.
Thank you, Signy and Jesse. That was great. Hopefully one theme that you got from their stories was that the rural communities are really instrumental in rolling out the red carpet for our MSU pre-service teachers. They are really what makes the experience a rich and varied experience. So this evening we have Val Damron. So she was part of the welcome committee for Glendive. She's there in the back. The admin support has been amazing. Stefan Schreibies, the superintendent of Glendive, he gave up 3 of his evenings to talk with our students before going on the trip, which is just something that is so amazing. Usually you don't get that kind of accessibility with a superintendent. So they have really shown what the rural advantage is when it comes to teaching and living in rural communities. The final experience that's available to our students is rural student teaching, and this can take place in a number of different formats. We have kind of our more traditional rural student teaching where some of our rural students may end up going back home, where they might find a town that they want to teach in. They're usually in that community by themselves, but they end up having some support from MSU. They have a local field supervisor. We kind of organize the placement. When I asked my students, what is the number one thing that is making you nervous about taking a position at a rural school or doing your student teaching in a rural community? And they said a lack of support from their peers. So we ended up coming up with this rural teaching pod where we place students together as a group in a rural community. So they have different layers of support in terms of having each other. They have their field supervisor. We have an additional role called an ally mentor, who is someone that can coach the students on what it's like to navigate a rural community and a rural school. Additionally, I end up traveling up a few times during the semester to do some team building activities. And it was so wonderful for me to end up seeing the growth of our students between the different times I would come up to observe them. So we will have our speakers for the Rural Student Teaching Pod, Mariah Liam and Kristen Vincent. Come on up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mariah Liam. I'm kind of in a different situation than a lot of you. I have been able to go on 2 practicums and a student teaching with Marcy. So I have been all across the state of Montana with Marcy. We've had many adventures. I have a couple stories coming later about things Marcy has done or has made us do. So I'm just going to kind of talk about my personal experience since I have been in this with the long run with her. So hang with me because I got some stories. So the first thing that is noticeable about rural pathways is the support system. I've been to Glendive, I've been to Moore, Montana, outside Lewistown, and then I also went up to Shelby for student teaching. One of my favorite CTs I've ever had was the one that I had in Moore. She still texts me almost daily. She calls them our kids, not just her kids, our kids. I was in a 4th and 5th grade classroom and there was 9 kids between the 2 grades, which was super awesome and just incredible kids. And she sends me pictures all the time and just kind of makes me feel like I'm still there. Number 2 is experiences. And like all of the other awesome presenters, you've heard about the awesome educational things. This is where the stories of Marcy is going to come in. One of my favorites was we were in Glendive and we were going bowling at the bowling alley. And here comes a horse and cowboy riding up to the bowling alley, just wanting to go bowling, and tied his horse out front and played a few lanes. Number 2 was playing pool with Marcy and Jack in Lewistown. The third one is driving a Chevy Malibu to Moore, Montana, super rural, after it had just snowed a foot. And I was pushing snow with the front of my car pulling into school. It's like, we're here, we're ready to go. And now the car is stuck. And the last one was painting night in Lewistown. Marcy made us paint landscapes of rural Montana. I was like, oh, I got this, easy. So I was like trying to paint like the wheat and make it look like super cool. And here comes Marcy and she goes, that looks like chicken feet. I was like, okay, we're gonna fix that. Third thing is traveling across the state of Montana. I'm from Montana. I grew up about 30 minutes outside of Bozeman.
But I have been to places that I never would have even had at the top of my list. And I'm super, super thankful that I've got to go to those places. Next is relationships. I have a support system, like I said, across the state of Montana now, whether that is CTs, principals, students. Favorite story from more, there's a Mapping Montana activity that I actually did with my fourth graders when I was student teaching, and I was talking to Carolyn about it, and she said that we had to make sure that we went through Shelby because that's where you were student teaching, and we had to make sure that we went to Three Forks because that's where we knew you were from. So that was, I mean, 4 months down the road from when I was there, and they were still talking about Miss Liam. That leads right into impact. I've really realized throughout my experiences with this, just the impact that this program brings to students in the Valley and kind of a little bit outside of the Valley. They're probably used to practicum kids or student teachers, just because we have so many that go through there. But in the rural places, they don't have that. So it's like when you have an MSU student teacher or practicum kid, it's like you are like famous because they haven't had one in a while and they might not have one again, depending on where they are at. But I kind of just saw the impact that me being in a classroom, me not really thinking anything of it, brought to these kids. Next is a different outlook on teaching. If you would have asked me my freshman year, I probably never would have said that I would enjoy teaching in rural Montana, but it's kind of the place that I want to be, and I don't really want to be anywhere else because of this program. So it's kind of really opened up my eyes to that. Next is immersing yourself into these communities. I have learned how to get out of my comfort zone or to not even have a comfort zone going into these towns, because if you have a comfort zone, you're not really going to grow and you're not going to get the best experience. So for those of you who are a little bit behind me, just rip off the Band-Aid, go for the experiences because they are definitely worth it and you're going to have some stories from it. I also learned a ton about myself and going into all of these different places. I've been telling people that student teaching in Shelby was probably one of the best things that I could have done for myself and just for the trajectory of where my career is going to be starting. This is just a picture that I took when I was driving home from Shelby, Montana, the long 4-hour drive. But I really feel like it kind of just shows what this program does for undergraduates and for students, of just kind of opening that up and just giving so many different opportunities. So you may be wondering what was different about Shelby and Cup Bank. And again, this is a personal experience just of what I got to experience. First one is my CT and community. That is her pictured there. I called her my second mom, or I called her my Shelby mom, because anytime I needed anything, she was a text away, a phone call away. Anytime I had a question of like, where's the best place to eat? Or like, I broke this, can you help me? She was like, here's a list of people, call this guy, he'll help you. Like, just an awesome, awesome community too that I was working with. That was just, community was including teachers, staff, anybody else. They wrote us up in the newspaper of the student teachers that were in town. But anytime they heard they were a student teacher, they're like, oh my gosh, we knew you were in town. Like, we can't wait to meet you. Or one of my favorite stories is we were walking into a coffee shop when we were up there kind of like checking things out. And the guy heard that we were all student teachers. So he bought 7, 8, 9 of us all of our coffees because he heard we were new to town. Next is experiences. I got some awesome, awesome experiences going to Shelby. Aside from teaching, I got to go to Galata Elementary, which is just outside of Shelby, and it was actually a one-room schoolhouse. And I hung out there for like half a day, but there was 6 kids, kindergarten to 6th grade. And the teacher was actually one of my CT's best friends. So that was just really fun. And I got to learn so much and a lot of new ideas that I'm going to be taking with me. Next is I also got to go to the Big Rose Hutterite colony, which I have never been to one of those. I know they are all over Montana, but it was awesome to get to go to one of those as well. And once again, I knew the teacher, so I just hung out with her and learned things and had an amazing meal. So that was also incredible. I had a new appreciation for just what rural teaching is, or for rural Montana. I actually got to learn what rural teachers do because I was one for 3 months and I'm continuing to be one when I graduate. I learned to adapt to circumstances. Rural Montana, you don't have all of those resources that you need right at your fingertips. So I learned how to be really flexible and creative with the resources I did have. And I also had a new appreciation for where I grew up and also how I was raised. Shelby, student teaching in Shelby provided me direction of where to teach, what grade to teach, and how to be more than a teacher to these kids. Also, I know Kristen's going to talk about it later, but also the support group of other student teachers that we had up there was just really, really fun. The last thing that I want to talk about is place-based education. Marcy talked on this a little bit, but when I was in practicum in Lewistown, we went to Maiden, Montana, which was a ghost town. And it was really, really cool. Like I absolutely love those old ghost towns and Montana's history in that. So my CT and more, she gave me free reign, whatever I wanted to do. So I was like, let's do like a Montana history unit. So what I actually did was based off of Maiden, Montana that I knew we were going to, I created a unit for these kids to kind of like live in a day of a ghost town, which was super, super fun. The first day you can see on that bulletin board there, they created a poster about one of the ghost towns that they were assigned in Montana. And they had like a kind of itinerary of what they needed to research. That was the first day. The second was probably my favorite day. I taught them about inflation and I brought them to the Virginia City Mercantile for the first day, and they had a certain amount of money in a certain scenario, like their house burned down, they lost all their shoes or their mining supplies, and trying to teach kids that you need shoes on a daily basis, that was a difficult lesson to try to teach them. And then we went and we changed it to, it was like Lee and Dad's in Lewistown. So we taught them about inflation and about how prices change. The third day, I turned them into criminals, and we kind of talked about what the justice system looks like back in those days and how it's drastically different from today. And then the very last day, we created wanted posters, and they had to think of a crime that they did at school that they weren't supposed to do. That was also really fun. And I just really just learned the importance of place-based education and how it's so important to immerse your students into the place that they live and the resources that they have around them. And it was really fun to teach where we were versus where we are now today. So I'll give it over to Kristen.
All right, thanks, Mariah. So my name is Kristen Vincent, and I'm here to talk to you guys today about what we experienced in Shelby, but also I wanted to give you guys a little bit of my background. So growing up, I lived in Hobson, Montana, which is a Class C school in central Montana. I graduated with 12 kids, and I always knew that I never wanted to teach anything higher than a B school. I knew in my heart that rural was where my heart was, and rural was all the way. That's the only thing I ever wanted to teach. That's just what appealed to me. So when I got this opportunity that they said that they're sending teachers to a rural teaching opportunity, I was like, heck, Shelby's bigger than the high school that I went to, so I might as well go see what that's like. So going into Shelby, I was a little not cautious, but I was a little intrigued to see what we would actually get done and what we would do as experimental activities to include, like, have us engaged. But this turned into a vast variety of things, from Wednesday trivia nights to just texting our friends and being like, hey, let's go to the basketball game. And we even had a couple girls take a spontaneous trip to Canada. So one of the best things about the rural teaching pod was that we sent a group of people there that were, I think there were 7 of us total, and you had friends or colleagues and cohort people just one text away. You just kind of had that availability of them just to talk, like bounce ideas off of, and then just take random car rides and just talk about everything that happened that week, whether it was a kid misbehaving or something happened in your house, something broke, just a lot of general things that come through that teaching pod that was really beneficial to me individually. If I would have went up to Shelby by myself, it definitely would have been a whole different experience. I'd never been up to Shelby personally. I never really had a reason to, but I was like, I might as well try it out. And definitely, if I wouldn't have had the people there, so like all 7 of us there, would have been a lot more sad, to say the least. So I was really glad that I had those built-in people to really talk to. It just made it a lot easier to get accustomed to the town and then being a little bit further away from home. You still felt the hominess with everyone else, considering that you were 2 hours or 4 hours away from home. So it was really nice to have that extra amount of people to live with and just be able to talk to, because they're also in the same boat. So the next thing is the support that MSU has given us as rural educators. So Marcy was kind enough to set up a whole visit for us to go up to Shelby and Cut Bank in December of 2022. So this was our first experience that we got with Shelby. We were able to talk to the superintendents, the principals, our cooperating teachers, meet everybody in the town. And like Mariah said, we went to a coffee shop and one local business bought us coffee. So that was kind of cool.
But this initial visit was just great to be able to get into the community. It's always kind of scary going into a rural community because everybody knows everybody, and that's just how it is. So when you go into a new rural community that you're not a part of, you might feel a little out of place, but they're gonna be more than welcoming for you to come in. So we had team building visits team building visits when Marcy would come up and help us or just be able to see us in our classroom, see us in our elements. Marcy was my science methods teacher. So to see her or to get her to actually be able to come in and see me in my science classroom, it was really kind of a full circle moment. And it was really kind of rewarding to be like, yeah, she can see how far I improved from science methods to just getting her first visit to her second visit. It was just really cool to get that experience through the support. And then we even had a weekend where Joe came, and it was just really great to have dinner with everybody and just get that opportunity to kind of come back together and really see how things at MSU were going, because we were kind of in the middle of nowhere. So kind of get back tied to MSU, but still have that support of being in the rural community. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was our ally mentor, Lorna. She was really a key element because it was really nice to have somebody to talk to that wasn't necessarily affiliated directly through MSU. Like she was through MSU, but she wasn't grading us on anything. So we were just free to talk to her about anything that we might be struggling with, how our classrooms might be going, what we might have questions about in general, because she was a teacher, so she could answer all those questions for us. And it's just nice to be able to kind of vent to somebody who we knew we weren't going to be getting a grade from. The last thing from the support of rural educators was the living stipend. So that was a big aspect to, I knew I wanted to teach in rural, but just having that relief from a financial burden of finding a place that was maybe a little bit more expensive than what I initially thought, and just having that to cover my tuition plus having a place, it was just nice to have that, just to be able to breathe a little bit and have that living stipend that allowed us to freely explore this new opportunity of rural teaching. So the last thing, like I kind of talked about in the beginning, in a rural community, you are going to be treated like royalty. Not only did we have, in rural communities, housing is always a big problem. There's kind of a lack of housing, but through support, the field supervisors helped a couple girls get a place in Shelby. A high school math teacher helped me get my place in Shelby because her husband knew this whole line of people, and so that's how I got my place. The district of Cut Bank actually found a place for the people in Cut Bank, and then another one was actually living with another teacher, or two of them lived with teachers from the respective schools. So everyone went out of their way in their busy schedules to help us find a place to live so we could experience Shelby personally and get to feel like we actually live and are involved in the community. So the first day of visiting, the superintendents of the respective schools took us out to get gear. So coyote gear for the ones from Shelby, and then the wolf gear from the people from Cut Bank, whatever that is. So it was pretty cool just to be able to take that moment from the superintendents. They didn't even know us. This was the first day that we visited, but they knew that they wanted to go out of their way to make it feel like we belong there. So the superintendent from Shelby took us on a tour. He took us out to like the hiking trails, and I'm sure people in Cut Bank got something similar. And then honestly, you just get all the support you could ever want from a rural school. Mr. Crump assisted Mariah with finding her Montana history unit stuff. With the touch of an email, you can get supplies from anything. So local businesses learn to know your name. We made it a weekend trip or a weekly trip to go to Cut Bank to do trivia, and the owner of that business knew us by name. Anytime we walked in, they'd be like, "Hey, Kristen, hey, Mariah, Andrew," everybody. And it was so cool just to experience that. And then you're also gonna have help in any way you could ever want it. Not only from your cooperating teachers, but all the teachers in the school. I had the luck, I was lucky to have two science teachers. I had my cooperating teacher, and then there was another science teacher, and she was just as willing to welcome me into her classroom as my cooperating teacher was. I know other people did stuff with other teachers, and they were just ready at the touch of a finger to send a email and say that you needed help. And they were just so willing to help you and just give you that support that you might need in a rural community. So I think that's it. Oh, sorry, one more. Like I said, rural communities, you're always going to wear a multitude of hats. So growing up in a rural community, I knew this from experience, but then also going to student teach at a community, I had the opportunity to coach middle school volleyball, and some of the other students did an after school program. And it's just important to be involved in that community that you're teaching in, because ultimately to see the students outside of school is going to mean way more to them than seeing them inside of school, if that makes sense. If they see that you care about them and that you care about what their interests are outside of school, they're going to be way more willing to respect you and trust you inside of school. So like I said, you're going to wear many hats and just be interested in all activities that are going on, whether it's basketball, a music recital, a play, anything that you can do. It's always important when you're visiting a rural school to be present. And lastly, I want you to be approachable. If you ever get the opportunity to go to a rural school, the students want to know what college is like. You're going to get many questions, and some of them you have to tame down a little bit, but they just want to know what it's like to be a student teacher, what it's like to be in college. For them, some of them, it's the next step. Some of them don't know what college life is like. Maybe they're the first in their family who's maybe wanting to go to college. They're going to ask lots of questions. And also, the staff wants to know how things are different, like how things from maybe when they were back in school compared to how things are now, or from things how your practicum experience was, like I did mine in Bozeman High, and to go from Bozeman High to Shelby was quite the difference. So the staff just wants to know how things are going and how things are different compared to what your other experiences might have been, because they want to grow as well. And the last thing, we'll be willing to get a little personal at times. If you act like you care, your students are going to want to care as well, if that makes sense. So be able to make them feel safe and comfortable. Okay, I think I'm done now. Yep, sorry.
Another round of applause to just all of our pre-service teachers and all of our school partners for making these opportunities possible this year. We live and breathe the land grant mission. And so as you take a look just at the map in this past academic year, the different touch points that we've had and partnerships that we have initiated and cultivated and continue to grow. Here's just a list of all of the communities in which across these 4 experiences, we've had the good fortune of being a part of and welcomed in and supported. And here's just one more way of looking at just kind of the breakdown of that first early experience to the freshman year to sophomore to junior to ultimately that senior student teaching pod or rural student teaching. Combined, we've had over 119 pre-service teachers in 30 different schools with a combined over 3,000 service hours through these experiences. And so this takes everyone in this room to make this possible, and we're so excited for that next chapter. And so with that, with the remaining time, if you're not at a table with pre-service teachers, I highly encourage you to kind of come together. This is a great opportunity to continue the conversation in a little bit more intimate environment so that you can learn and grow together as we look to build the next experience. Thank you all for being here today.